I managed to bore my son to tears. And because my idea was we were going to sit from 8:30 to 2 and do these worksheets, because I was, this is what you did in first grade, this is what you did in second grade, and here I had taught before and I had this degree. I was like, what am I doing? What's wrong?
Welcome to Homeschool Talks, a podcast by HSLDA. This is a show about all things homeschooling, from practical tips to inspiring stories and everything in between. This episode of Homeschool Talks features a conversation originally hosted live on our Facebook page. So if you like what you hear, be sure to follow us there for more content like this. We're so glad you've joined us today, and we hope you enjoy the program.
Hello and welcome to Incorporating STEM into Your Homeschool. I'm so glad that we can be here today. I've been looking forward to this. We have with us today Michelle Moody, who is from the Homeschool Scientist. What a great name for a website. And she's joining us today. Thank you for being here, Michelle.
Thank you for having me.
Michelle, can you tell us about your kids, where they are now versus how they kind of started out?
Sure. I have two children. My oldest graduated from college 5.5 years ago with a mechanical engineering degree. And he is working for a company that designs and manufactures instrumentation that's based on X-ray technology and optics technology. And I have a daughter who is a junior in college studying biology, and she's very immersed in it. She tutors several levels of biology for the university. She works in a research lab alongside two professors, one in a plant biology project and one in an animal biology project. So that's where they are today.
Oh, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah.
It's neat to see both the life science side as well as the more the physics, the mechanical engineering side. So what inspired you to get homeschooling in the first place?
Well, my background, my education background, I have an undergraduate and graduate degree in child development and early childhood education. And so I taught K4, K5 when I was in graduate school and a little bit afterwards. So I had heard about homeschooling when I was in graduate school, and it really caught my interest. But my career kind of took a turn and I went into STEM. I was in that for 12 years, worked for a biotechnology company. I developed computer systems, learned all about DNA testing. And in the meantime, had my son. It was time for him to go into kindergarten. We knew we wanted to homeschool. And so we thought, okay, one more year, I'll work one more year, we'll save. We knew I'd be coming out of the workforce. We'd be down to one income. So we said, we'll do kindergarten at this church program. So he was a young kindergartner. He turned 5 in October while he was in kindergarten. And I had been working with him because, like parents, we're just we're natural teachers. So we had been reading a lot, and he was really showing interest in reading. So we started phonics, and he was reading right when he turned 5. He was in kindergarten. So everything was going well. And until about April, and his teacher pulled me aside and said, it's really being disruptive. And I thought, oh, my child? I said, I'll go in and observe. And so I went in, and they got to sitting down to do their seat work, and she started going over phonics, and they were going over the letter F. I remember it. And she held up a little frog. And I could just see his eyes kind of wandering over, looking at the blocks, and he was kind of shifting in his seat, and so I knew what was going on. And I talked with the teacher, and I said, well, he knows this, and he's kind of looking for something else to engage him, to keep him interested. And so, we talked about it, and I knew that we were getting towards the end of the year, and they really, that was their plan till the end of the year, was to work on phonics. And it was really at that point, it was like God was saying, okay, now is the time. You need to come home and homeschool. You need to trust me on the money thing and the family finances. And now is the time to get started homeschooling. So that's what we did. And that May was the NCHE conference, and our state conference. So I went there, and I think I know I bought way more than I ever would use, right? Because we didn't have Facebook groups at that time. It was 1998. I really hadn't hooked up with the support group. And so I bought way more than we needed, but I got my books. I remember I bought what your first graders should know, what your second graders should know. I don't remember if you remember those books. I went to our state website, Department of Education website, and printed out everything that they would cover in public school in first grade and second grade. I bought a copier, a little desktop copier. I had our workbooks, and we were ready to get started. So for the next 2 years, I managed to bore my son to tears. And because my idea was we were going to sit from, 8:30 to 2 and do these worksheets, because I was, this is what you did in first grade. This is what you did in second grade. And I was really letting those things dictate it. And so we would go to park day, but, I was like, I'm failing at this. I mean, I'm boring him. It just was not working. And here I had taught before and I had this degree. I was like, what am I doing? What's wrong? And I didn't want to go to park day and tell moms, hey, this is failing miserably. No one else was talking about that. I thought that's just what you did. And so, I thought the Legos and all the robots that he was drawing and all those things were, those were good for after school hours and after our worksheets. And I really was struggling. And so I remember just like sitting down and talking with God and praying and saying, you've put this on my heart so strongly to do this, what can I do? And it was almost like God yelled down to me, ask him what he wants to study. And so I thought, okay, I think I'll ask him what he wants to study. And so I did. We sat down and had that conversation. And I asked him, what's the one thing you really want to learn about this year in school? And without hesitation, he said, I want to build a robot. And that was like the most pivotal moment in our homeschooling. I know it was pivotal for him because he didn't have to do worksheets for 5.5 hours sitting next to me at a table. But it really, it was like God just really showed me in that moment that I need to really stop and look at what's he doing in his spare time? What's he interested in? How does he learn? What's that one thing that he's just so interested in? And he told me right then, robots. It was, so I really stopped, letting the, what everyone thought should be done in first grade and second grade dictating it. And this is one area. I mean, we still had our math and we still had our spelling and we still had our vocabulary, we still did that. But in this one area, like he could start leading it. And my job was to start being that guide. And it really went through all the way through 12th grade. And I think as we talk, I'll talk about that a little bit more, because we don't want our kids to think that learning is just what we do between these hours and what we dictate. We want them, people say we want them to become independent learners by the time they're in high school and they get to those tough, we get to those higher level courses. But I think that before they become that independent learner, they have to love learning. And that's, I think, one of the things that I learned from that moment was that I needed to focus on something that he was really interested in and start guiding him through that and developing that interest and see where it went. And so that's kind of how we got started.
Mm-hmm. Now, your daughter has a slightly different story, because not all STEM students show that amazing clarity and interest at a young age like your son did.
Mm.
Maybe you could kind of touch on a little bit, because I just want to give the idea that STEM doesn't have to start in first, second, third grade to be successful. It can be started at many different levels. You may find that you have a late bloomer that loves STEM. So maybe you might want to talk a little bit about your
Sure.
daughter too, because
Okay.
hers was more of a latent bloom.
It was, it
Yeah.
was. She
Mhm.
kind of took a circuitous route, and very early on, she was interested in animals. I think a lot of children are, and so we did a lot of animal things, and I can get into that a little bit later. But up until about eighth grade, we were really focused on the animals, animal biology, and then she got into high school, and we happened to visit and attend a performance by a Shakespeare troupe. And it was a high school troupe, and she ended up getting into Shakespeare and theater after that. And we really were pretty intensive with that. She actually got herself an internship as a stage manager, which later actually is helping her now in college with her tutoring. Um, and so we kind of went that route, but she always loved biology. She always did well in biology. And then when she got into college, she took the freshman biology course and absolutely loved it. And within the first 4 weeks of college, she called me and said, "I've changed my major. I'm going into biology." And she has been all in, 200% since then. So yeah, she definitely took a different route. Her high school track of courses wasn't the STEM. She did the math and the science, but yeah, she still some of her experiences still came to fruition and paid off once she got into college.
I think that's very encouraging for parents
Hmm.
to hear because oftentimes people expect students so young to know what they want to do and they don't. And
Yeah,
obviously, decisions can be made much later than you would normally expect for STEM. I
absolutely.
too was a late bloomer in STEM. I found science particularly, I kept up the math, but I found science particularly uninteresting until I took it in college and was being taught by people who really loved the science.
Hmm.
And it was a totally different view. So it's
Yep.
helpful to realize that you're maybe you could help parents right now by talking some ways that you encourage STEM when your kids were younger, and then maybe
Okay.
how that might look a little differently, encouraging students that are taking on STEM in middle school, and then maybe how that looks a little bit different when you're encouraging STEM in high school. Would you
Okay.
like to? Yeah.
Sure. I think I think there are four things that are important for parents when you're encouraging STEM, and I think one of them
Mhm.
is to look at science not just as your curriculum and something that we do from 10 to 11 on these days, or it becomes sort of integrated into life. And what I mean by that is. Um, we did things like we had a butterfly habitat and a ladybug land on our kitchen counter, throughout the spring and summer. We did it year after year. We just had things around for them, and it was just part of science was just there. I would research activities that were going on in the community. I didn't know we had a fish hatchery less than 20 minutes from our house. It was owned by the city, so we went and toured the fish hatchery. So we really encouraged science just to be part of life, and it wasn't just the curriculum. So I think that's one of the things. Um, I think the other thing is it's important for our children not to be afraid of learning. That we're there to guide them in this interest, whether it's horses or computers or taking small engines apart or tinkering with um, with whatever, dirt bikes, whatever it is, and to give them those opportunities to take it to the next level. So, for example, for my son in elementary school, it was Lego Mindstorms. We made the investment in that kit. We ended up starting a team with other families. We worked really as a co-op to do it. And then in middle school, it's like, okay, how do we take it to the next level? And so we were looking for opportunities to expand it and to keep him engaged and that he could lead that. So he started learning CAD, AutoCAD. And we introduced him to that, but he took it and he ran with it. And it was those things that kind of kept them engaged and they could then take ownership of it. So, we want them to see learning as not just this thing, as I said, from, these certain hours of the day or these certain years in their life. And then in high school, he went on and he took the next step of learning a 3D CAD program. So, You're just, our role is really to sort of guide them, help them find those opportunities, and help them sort of like, build that interest and take it to the next level.
Mhm.
Um, s- so we don't
We
want
also,
them to be in them. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, we also want to, maybe you'd like to address some students are STEM non-interested, and
Hmm.
yet that doesn't mean we don't want to ignore that area, because science and math and technology, computers, has a great effect on just going out into the
Hmm.
business world. So maybe you might want to offer some ideas for parents that are dealing with students that aren't self-directed and taking on, because you have so many things available on your website that actually really could help a parent, that is
Hmm.
the same things that allow a STEM student who is interested pursue it can also interest a student who isn't interested. Maybe
Right.
you'd like to,
Right.
yeah.
And I think one of the
Mhm.
things that we need to do, and I'm glad you bring that up, because um, there is a study that was out in the last 5 years about girls in STEM, and
Mhm.
they did a similar study back in the late 80s about girls in STEM. And what they found, both, it's 30 years apart, was that um, the girls started out really interested in elementary school, and then by middle school they were, that's not for me, girls don't do that. And then in high school they were really shying away from math and science. And so really, one of the things is to, our attitude towards it. I know when I was in middle school, I just I was I was frightened to death of the 8th grade frog dissection that was coming up. I mean, our middle school was 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and I was worrying about that dissection the day I walked in at 6th grade. So by the time 8th grade came around for that dissection, I didn't wanna do it. It just, I could still smell it, I could still see it, and I was
Mhm.
just really averse to that. I mean, so I
Mhm.
I understand that. So, I didn't want to project that onto my kids. So I think part of it is so I had to make a conscious effort not to tell my daughter, who was very interested in animals, ew, dissections. So I think that's one of it, is that, we've got to introduce these topics to them in a fun and hands-on way. And, I've got a list of resources on my site. If you go to the homeschoolscientist.com, and the top navigation bar, it says STEM resources. And there are things there. If you have a child who's into computers, is in front of the computer all the time, okay, how can I channel that? They say they're not interested in anything. Well, there's some um, gaming software they can learn to program. There's some basic level Scratch programming. So there are a lot of different things, and really just try different things. Try a variety of things. They don't have to be anything formal. Um, Go to museums, look for resources and programs. I've got a lot listed on that sheet, and just try different things with them. I think that's the big thing, is just exposing them to a variety of things. If they like to be outside taking apart the lawnmower or their dirt bike, and that's the only thing they're interested in, that that can turn into something they do STEM related once they graduate. So I would say offer them a variety of activities. And it doesn't have to be book work. It can be going out to places, or kits, or learning to program. So there's a lot of resources out there, and we just have to try different things.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it also helps to take a bigger picture about what, let's just take for science right now, because science doesn't usually get going in a middle school till really, or elementary school until fifth grade, because they're
Hmm.
not logical thinkers until about that age. So any investigation done before that is wonderful to do, and can certainly follow their interests. I remember my son just loved ants. So it's amazing how much we learned about ants.
Hmm.
I'm just glad they didn't invade our house. But so that was more of an interest driven. But once we got fifth through eighth grade, is kind of an introduction to all aspects of science that you might be seeing in high school and beyond. And there's no specific order. There's light and sound, electricity, magnetism, geology, space, biology, plants, the anatomy, all sorts of things. So whichever curriculum you happen to be using, they will cycle through all of those in the 5th through 8th grade years in order to prepare them to study at the high school level, starting basically in 9th grade. So if you realize that that's all it is an introduction, that can free you a little bit away from the idea that we have to cover X amount of this year or this month, because sometimes it is the curriculum you're dealing with that. And so maybe you'd like to speak a little bit to, in a way, working with curriculum and sometimes freeing yourself from curriculum in order to invest an interest in STEM. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm glad you bring that up, because I will say this, K through 6th grade with my son, it was, 98, 99, 2000. I didn't use a curriculum K through 6 with him, science curriculum. I went to the library. We got experiment books, physics experiments, chemistry books. And then, of course, we did the Lego Mindstorms. So that's what we did. And what I had him do, and I did the same thing with my daughter. Now, we did start using one in 5th grade with her. But what I had them do was we did those experiments. We did them according to the experiments. We made a little lab notebook that we had. But then I really believe in what I call discovery learning. And I let them take the experiment even further. So even if you're using a curriculum now, K through 6, there's a lot of great ones out there, very hands-on ones. You could still do this. And, if they have an experiment, schedule extra time, let them take it further. Like the water, oil, and food coloring experiment that we always did. They did it. And then my daughter was notorious for this. She would start adding ketchup and cinnamon, and they would test their own things. And I think that's so important from a young age, because in STEM, that's what it's all about in those careers. You are testing things. You're thinking creatively. You're not afraid to bring your ideas to the table, and you can work together on a team to create solutions. So whether you're, working in chemistry lab, developing drug therapies, or you're in machining and doing CNC work, which my husband does, and it's a lot of creative thinking. So, even if you're using a curriculum or not, it's that discovery learning and giving them time to do that. So they're not intimidated by learning. They're not intimidated by the curriculum. They're not intimidated by the topic. And they're willing to, let's explore that. Let's go that direction for a while. So I think that's very important. And then, of course, now 7th through 12th grade, we definitely used science curriculum because I really, we needed to get that foundation in middle school so we could handle those high school classes. And of course, we knew they were looking towards college, so we, had to get the college requirements, and my son knew exactly where he wanted to go to school, and we had to meet those requirements. But we still did the curriculum. But we also, when we did the experiments, they took it further, and they had other, it may not have been in their area of interest, but we kept that area of interest going. So, my son wasn't into biology, but he had to do the biology curriculum, but we had this interest that he had on the side. And so that kept him motivated because he had that robotics. He wanted to learn CAD. He wanted to learn the 2D CAD and the 3D CAD. My daughter, chemistry was not her thing. She does have a learning difference in that she has dyscalculia. So that was, we were working with that as well. But she had her biology, she had her theater interests. So that's what's kind of neat about them having this other sort of side interest. They have that going, and it kind of gives them that confidence to in that love of learning, that they sort of attack some of their other topics, their other school subjects with that same attitude.
You bring
So,
up an interesting point. It turns out observation skills, which are taught in science, are
mhm,
very crucial for all the subject areas in high school.
mhm,
And it's odd to think that being a good observer actually makes you a better writer of a history paper or a better writer of an English paper. So teaching observational skills is huge. And it's not something that is, I wish that there were more books that talked about, how to teach this one skill. Sometimes skills get mashed together. You have to observe and then conclude and then write a report. So much gets piled on it. Whereas if you're
mhm.
working with multiple age children, just working on your observation skills. What were the changes that happened? When did they happen? How did you determine that they happened? What didn't change? And just making those observation skills, just doing it orally, if that would make sense at first, and then maybe making one of the older students, if you have multiple children, writing down those observational skills. Most of our kids are good at, children are good at observing,
Mhm.
but writing down those observations is sometimes something that they are loath to do or don't think that that's an observation that should. And
That's right.
yeah, and then it comes down to a good conclusion isn't based on one observation, that's just an accident. 2 observations, that's just a coincidence. But you need to see a pattern of 3. So you have the idea that if you really want to have a good conclusion, you need to probably have 3 observations that are coming together to create, the three-legged
Yeah.
stool upon which that conclusion stands. And so it's really a thinking exercise you're teaching them. And that thinking, you're using science to do it, but it's crucial for all sorts of things.
It
Would you like,
definitely
yeah.
is. Yeah,
Mhm.
it definitely is.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, that's where like I said, that discovery learning and really getting them to think critically. And it starts at that very, very young age. And like I said, our role I see is not just as teachers when they've got that one interest that they, whether it's horses or
Mhm.
computers or electronics or car engines, or more mechanical engineering inclined,
Mhm.
and we kind of run with that one little interest. Our role is really to guide them to think creatively, to not be intimidated, to share, to explore their ideas, to communicate their ideas. And so we're kind of guiding and building them through that K through 12. So when they come to graduate, they can look back and
Mhm.
it's their thing that they've taken ownership of, and it's part of them, and they love it, um, or they enjoy it enough to say, okay, I'm going to, go get a job in this now. I'm going to go to trade school, 2-year college, 4-year college, or whatever. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah.
Mhm. And we've kind of been specializing a lot more on the science, but would you like to
Mm.
touch on a little bit more about the technology in engineering and math, that side? Because that's another area, a science student is one thing, a math student's a different, with an interest.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I do have some resources to talk about, like the computers
Mhm.
aspect. There's a lot of interest in computers, and there's game. And kids are in gaming and apps. I know I've heard a lot of parents talk about that. Um, and in that resource that's on the site under on my homepage, there are a lot of resources for coding, and there's uh, things from K through 12. There's AutoCAD. There's animation software. If you go to autodesk.com, they've got several animation software programs that kids can try for free. They've got training. So there are a lot of resources for that. Um, there are some things that I wanted to touch upon that I think that as parents that we can do, um, as they get older and as they get into high school and they start developing these deeper interests, that I think are very critical. So if they're interested in computers or the technology, that I think helps them continue to take ownership and take it up to that next level. Um, And one of them is just, talking about the curriculum. We said that they definitely need to be in that curriculum, 7th through 12th grade. But things are going to kind of kick up now because as you start looking for those resources, those programming opportunities, they need to start developing skills like in prototyping. So we need to help them tinker. And that's an important part, whether you're coding, whether you're in engineering, any kind of technology, prototyping is a big piece of it. So letting them go into the garage and build things, or letting them build a computer on their own. What's it like to put a computer together, get the software on there? What's it like to code a program and do a prototype, or code an app and do a prototype for the app? So those are all things that we need to help guide them. And one of our roles is to help them research, okay, how do we get started doing that? So as they start getting older, the parents, it's going to start getting a little busier. We're going to have to juggle some things, but it's all in guiding them and helping them get jazzed up and start taking that ownership of it. The other thing that I think is important that they need to get, whether they're in technology, engineering, or math, they need to have those team building skills. What's it like to work on a team? Because when you get into whether you're developing software, whether you're developing software tracking systems, or working on a biology research project, or you're in a chemistry lab, you've got to work as a team and share ideas. And again, not be afraid to communicate your ideas. So that's another thing to look for, or what are some team activities that they can take part of. And on that resource list that I have, I've got math competitions listed in there. There are things that you can do even from home that don't involve, driving distances and trying to get them here or there. So we really need to look for some of those resources that are out there. And our role as, as parents, is helping them find that.
Yeah.
And
One of the things we can do here at HSLDA is that we have high school consultants, as well as early years and early years through pre-K through 8, as well as special needs, because you really can tailor your homeschool to really be wonderful, as Michelle is explaining greatly. You can really characterize your homeschool to really make the most of what your teen is interested. And the nice thing too is in the day and age we live in, if you don't have a background in it, and if you're not the best researcher, we have resources we can send you. And obviously sites like the Homeschooling Scientist are great to go and visit, because people have been looking for this and they have materials to recommend. So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel, because sometimes that can look like a really heavy load on mom or dad. If there's a background in it, then they might feel really comfortable saying, sure, I know how to code, I'll help you. But if you want to learn about coding, there's classes that you can take, and you can start at any age. There's some that start with the elementary. There's some that say, no, we really want to work with middle school, or we're ready for high school. And that beginning course, no matter who's taking it, is a beginning course, and everyone needs to take it. So don't be afraid of just trying and looking. And if researching online and all the myriad of opportunities that flush out, if you would like a little bit more curated list, contact us here at HSLDA, because that's one of the things that we want to help parents do, is really customize. That's the real strength of homeschooling high school, as you can hear from Michelle. So is there some encouragement you want to add to? You've given so many resources here. Let's take a few minutes to look to see if there's some questions that have arisen. But do you have some other advice, encouragement to give parents that you kind of your stock and trade that would really give them a shot in the arm for the I'm a go-getter, I can do it, and I'm not sure that I can jump into this pool?
Yeah. Well, I assure you, like you said, there are resources out there. HSLDA has a lot of resources. Ask people. I mean, I really had to. I didn't know anything about building robots. I didn't know anything about. I certainly was scared to death of dissections. We had actually a nurse in our homeschool group who did all of the dissections, and my daughter was in 7th grade. I said, you know what, we're going to do the dissections. I think that's one message I have for parents is don't be afraid to work ahead, a grade level. My daughter at 5 years old was taking apart the owl pellets, challenge them. It could be that they just, work ahead. They've got that interest, go for it. Just try it. And you learn a lot by just trying things. As a homeschool parent, I was always learning. I mean, we're always learning. We're learning right alongside our kids. I did want to share a few things about high school and what's vital to high school. I talked, I look back on what I thought was, I talked to my kids. I do have an article on my site about girls in STEM. So if you want to go read that, that's got some really good everyday things that you can do. But these were some of the things that they really wanted to communicate as, looking back. And so I'll go over these briefly. One is to, number one, take your classes seriously. As I said before, my daughter has dyscalculia, and math was tough. And is it a struggle in college? It is. It was something that we struggled with in our homeschool. I struggled with it. She struggled with it. I mean, but we made it through, and we used a lot of resources, but that was one of the things they said. The other thing is look for an apprenticeship or an internship, whether you're in high school or in college. And there are a lot of high school apprenticeship programs now. They are exploding across the country. And in that resource that I have on my site, I give a list of those. So moms, if you're not a STEM person, that's okay, because there are some phenomenal apprenticeship programs for juniors and seniors in high school. So we don't have to know it all. Like you said, like the HSLDA's got the resources. There are people and organizations out there that are willing to help. So that's the other thing. The third thing was to tinker and build. Let them go out in the garage and tinker. Let them take a computer apart. Let them build it. You don't need to know how to do it. There are resources out there to help them learn how to do it, but let them, because doing prototypes is extremely important. And I will share this with you. The other thing is software skills. Excel. Don't downplay Excel, whether they're going to go into biology or engineering. Knowing Excel and how to do the statistics, they said they wish they had known it earlier. There are things out there that's out there on the internet to teach them that. I've got lots of links in that resource of different programming from K all the way up to 12. Know how to do a lab report. It's extremely important that they know how to do a lab report and do it well, because they are very detailed in college about that. And the other thing is have your resume ready. Even if they had any kind of a job, volunteering, babysitting, have it ready, because when they get into, if they're going on to college, or even if they're not, they're going into trade school or a job, they're going to have it. And then they should keep it updated, especially if they're in college, because once they are in college, opportunities come up. Hey, we've got this opening for a tutor. We need a research person. So be ready with a resume. And one thing I want to leave with people, and this is the importance of that guiding and building and letting them tinker and letting them explore, is when my son got out of college and he interviewed for the job he has now, his second interview, they made him do a PowerPoint presentation. And part of it was he had to talk to them about his garage projects. What have you been tinkering with the last 4 or 5 years? Because he was in a 5-year engineering program. It's like, what have you been doing? And that's why it's important for them to just take ownership of their learning. And this has to be theirs. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. I mean, they could be rebuilding computers and have, started a business doing that, or small engine repair. It could be anything, but getting their hands on and letting them do it. Yes, there are the books and the curriculum, but let them explore. And like I said, that discovery learning, because they have to have those skills when they get into those STEM jobs of being able to think creatively and take a project through to completion. So those were just some of the things that I thought were really interesting that they shared, looking back, as they're now where they are in their STEM career.
The resume is a good thing because it allows students to try things out, either as a volunteer, through a nature center or through a library or wherever the opportunities arise. Because sometimes thinking you're interested in it and then testing it out and volunteering changes your view of it. So that's a nice thing. The other good thing about a resume is scholarship organizations, what they want to know is they want to know what your teen was doing when they weren't in school. Well, that's what's on that resume. And so those applications, most teens can mess up an application if they don't have a resume to know what to put on that application. So a resume may never be something you show. It might be something you just use to fill in an application well.
That's right.
Same thing for a college application. Same thing for an apprenticeship application. We're talking about technical apprenticeships for trades. Those are done after high school, and they anywhere from 6 months to 6 years, depending on the trade that you're looking into. They have apprenticeship programs where you are paid a fine working wage as you are learning the trade, and you walk out with a certification that is recognized by the industry. But those organizations, as you apply for that, they want to know what you've been doing with your time as well. So there's the transcript, what you did while you were in school, and then there's the resume, what you did with your free time. And those two can make an amazing picture of your teens. So they're well worth taking the time to document them and have them ready, not because you have to worry about a professional looking one, just so that the information doesn't get lost. Because even if you're just applying for a job, knowing that you are looking at someone who has helped other people put together computers or solve computer problems, or helped tutor other students who are having trouble with math, or helped at a nature center as a volunteer, that is a very different person, looking for employment with that
That's right.
employer, rather than someone who's just sat around and had wonderful, great technical thoughts, but hasn't done anything with their time. So some of our students are just amazing. I think extracurricular, those resumes are where homeschooling students really stand out.
Absolutely.
So you've brought a very good point. So I think at this point, we need to, this has been an awesome conversation, Michelle. You have had so much, and I hope everyone will take the time to visit the homeschoolingscientist.com in order. I have that right, the homeschoolingscientist.com.
It's the homeschool. The homeschool science, the homeschoolscientist.com, and the resources up there in the top navigation bar.
And not only that, investigate the rest of the site. There's some math games. There's a lot of neat things that are on that. And I'm working with my grandchildren, and I'm enjoying that. So, and there's some experiments to try. So thank you so much for your passion for this, for your love, and for your willingness to share this with the homeschooling community. You're a leader in the community, and we just so appreciate you being here with us today. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you very much for having me.
Good. And if you don't have access, take time to access her site. Please also, if you're an HSLDA member and have some more questions specifically related to STEM, or even just setting up a consultation with one of our consultants and you're a high school student and parents, that we can kind of chart out what would be a good plan, both academically as well as on the resume side, to pursue a STEM career, please contact us here at HSLDA. You can join. We'd love to have you join at hslda.org/join. But anyway, it's been a privilege to talk about a topic that is so much of our today. We are such a technology, computer, science, and engineering, as well as the arts and all the other things, but all of them are being impacted by technology. So we just want to encourage everyone to encourage your teens to customize during these years. Thank you. It's been a real privilege to have you with us.
Today's program is made possible by HSLDA's Online Academy. When you're homeschooling a high schooler, it can be difficult to stay on top of everything they're learning. The good news is you don't have to do it all on your own. HSLDA Online Academy offers an expanding range of live, interactive online courses for grades 7 through 12. And if you're an HSLDA member, you can save up to $125 per course. To view a list of course offerings, visit academy.hslda.org. That's academy.hslda.org. Thanks for listening to this episode of Homeschool Talks. If you enjoyed this conversation, leave a review to let us know what you think. To hear more conversations like this one, be sure to subscribe to this podcast or head on over to hslda.org/podcast for more inspiring stories and awesome ideas about homeschooling. That's all for today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we'll see you next time.